and into the headlines. So many of your stories we're going to tell this evening on Queer News Tonight.
Tonight on the world's first live daily queer evening news show.
Tonight's news about the gay community and the news from an LGBTQ perspective. Are our gay stories important to you? In headlines, politics, entertainment, gay culture, travel, religion, and more. Reported by respected anchors.
Out of the closet and into the headlines on Q News Tonight.
Thank you for joining Queer News Tonight. We are live, and this is an unedited show, so anything can happen. This evening, we bring you the news of and a perspective from the LGBTQ community. I'm your anchor, Al Ferguson, and this is my co-anchors, Misty Eyes and Dr. Ty Hauser. So let's queer up the news. Tonight we begin with queer headlines. The LGBTQ community in America is diverse. The LGBTQ community around the world is vast, and we bring you the bullet points of queer news for today, Tuesday, August 18th, 2020. We begin by queering up entertainment in reporting that Ellen DeGeneres apologizes for hurting staffers' feelings as 3 producers part ways with the show. Watch this.
A source close to the comedian tells People that DeGeneres was, quote, crushed when she first heard of allegations of a toxic work environment on her show. That source adds that DeGeneres is determined to fix things and says that she's personally going to be invested in making sure those things are properly changed. Executive producers of DeGeneres' show have taken full responsibility for the show's operations, but Ellen apologized to her staff in a memo after a BuzzFeed news report uncovered claims of sexual harassment and misconduct.
Ellen DeGeneres is apologizing to the staff of her talk show following accusations of a toxic workplace. DeGeneres' second apology comes as 3 of the top Ellen DeGeneres show producers, Ed Glavin, Kevin Lehman, and Jonathan Norman, have parted ways with the show following an internal investigation by Warner Media. A Warner Brothers spokesman confirms to People magazine. In an emotional video conference with staff on Monday, DeGeneres told staff she wasn't perfect. A source who was on the call said. DeGeneres added that she accepted responsibility and was committed to ensuring this does not happen again.
Leave Ellen alone. Everyone is talking about Ellen DeGeneres, and okay, so we are risking canceling her show because she's mean. How many people in Hollywood are mean? A lot. I don't get the deal. Yeah, so she's the queen of nice, but behind the scenes, not everyone's super nice. I think people should leave her alone.
I have faith in Ellen. I think that a good house cleaning is always important for things like this, and I think that she will. I think she'll continue to do the right thing.
That's a very positive way to look at this. Enough is enough. We've been talking about it at Q News Tonight for almost 6 weeks now. And I actually think that this is going to be a blessing in disguise to rejuvenate Ellen and make the show even better after 18 years, including much more diversity and a lot less bullying.
Next, we queer up health. The FDA approves human trial for treatment to cure HIV. Watch this.
With HIV in 1980 is that I would know my patients for probably about 6 months and then they would die. And they would die usually pretty horrible deaths. Many of my patients became my friends and many of my friends became my patients, and it was a really difficult time personally for me because I had very little to offer them except for some transient hope and to prolong their life.
American Gene Technologies, a gene and cell therapy company, announced on August 11th that it has received approval from the Food and Drug Administration to begin its first human clinical trial for a unique cell-altering treatment that it believes will enable the immune system of people who are HIV positive to permanently eliminate HIV from their body. AGT developed a new treatment to repair immune system damage done by HIV and allow natural, we're in a political year, natural responses to control the virus. The company says in a statement announcing the approval for its clinical trial. From its research, AGT believes a cure is attainable and is now taking the significant step of testing in humans. If true, this could be a moment the LGBT community and the entire world has been waiting for decades.
Everyone in Queer News Tonight takes a moment to recognize this history announcement.
Human trials for a cure to AIDS has begun.
This plague was the original pandemic for the gay community.
Nearly 800,000 Americans, we remind you, have perished.
38 long years.
We can finally see a light at the end of the long tunnel.
Now, we'll Queer Up the Vote 2020. DNC highlights, including Michelle, vote for Joe Biden like our lives depend on it. That means you, LGBTQ America. Watch this.
One thing from my words tonight, it is this. If you think things cannot possibly get worse, trust me, they can and they will if we don't make a change in this election. If we have any hope of ending this chaos, we have got to vote for Joe Biden like our lives depend on it.
Former First Lady Michelle Obama, in an intimate video speech for the Democratic National Convention, made a personal plea Monday for voters to reject President Trump. In her remarks, drawing on her ability to connect personally with an audience, Obama urged Americans to back Joe Biden in the presidential election, drawing on the coronavirus crisis, economic hardship, and call to action against racism in the United States. The lineup behind her featured politicians from both sides of the aisle, as well as Kristen Urquiza, the daughter of a man who died from COVID-19, who said his only pre-existing condition was trusting Donald Trump. All around, a powerful night of rebukes of the president.
Well, it was an exciting evening. Michelle Obama did one of the best DNC speeches that I have ever seen, and I absolutely loved her call out that as it related to Donald Trump's speech, the virus of Donald Trump, it is what it is.
She is a true role model and a person that I personally look up to, and I'm so proud that women and children can look up to her all across the world.
You know, I cried. Her call to empathy and her call for us to, start to care for each other, that's right where my heart has been since this buffoon was elected.
Well, we queer up entertainment in reporting that Owl House makes history with Disney's first bisexual lead character. The Disney Channel animated television series, The Owl House, has made history by having Disney's first bisexual lead character. Luz Nocita, the show's 14-year-old protagonist, is a normal teen who goes on a journey to another world to become a witch. Luz has shown she's attracted to male characters in the show, and in the two most recent episodes, a relationship between Luz and the recurring female character Amity is explored. It is revealed that Amity had intentions to ask Luz to Grom, the world's version of prom, and the two share a dance together. Series creator Dana Terrence, who is bi herself, said that the higher-ups at Disney were very supportive of the move, which was a welcome surprise.
Next we queer up the USA. Today, August 18, is the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment on women's right to vote. But of course we mean whites only. The 19th Amendment is celebrated as giving all women the right to vote and is a milestone in women's rights. It reads, "The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex." In reality, though, politicians and local government tried their best. I'm black.
Sorry, we're having a technical problem here. About many Asian American women lacked citizenship in the 1920s, which means they couldn't vote in the first place. This was by design, as many suffragettes, such as Elizabeth Cady Stanton, wanted the support of the South to get the amendment ratified. It is an important milestone for sure, but we have come a very long way since then.
Now we'll queer up the USA. Trans woman dehumanized after Miami police mocked their genitals throughout a night. 2 transgender women say that Miami police left them feeling erased and dehumanized after repeatedly mocking their genitals following their arrest at a protest in support of Black transgender people. Gabriela Amaya Cruz and Jay Bucci said that Miami-Dade officers threatened to place them with men and allegedly mocked their genitals while they were being held and processed, and that their genitalia was a topic of conversation throughout the night. A spokesperson for Miami-Dade Corrections and Rehabilitation Department refused to comment on the treatment of Bucci and Cruz, but confirmed that genitalia are considered when deciding where to place trans women.
We continue tonight in Queering Up the USA and reporting a judge blocks Trump administration from enforcing antitrust healthcare rules, forcing a rule allowing healthcare providers to discriminate against transgendered patients, only one day before the regulation was set to go into effect. The U.S. District Judge Frederick Block, a Clinton appointee, draws heavily in his decision on the U.S. Supreme Court's recent landmark decision in Bostock versus Clayton County, which determined anti-LGBTQ discrimination is a form of sex discrimination. It is one of the first times the Supreme Court ruling has been cited in a decision on the federal level and may give a preview of what is to be expected in many fights to come for LGBT rights and equality. We continue in Queering Up the World in reporting Polish nationalists and LGBTQ activists have faced off in Warsaw. In a follow-up to a story we have been following closely at Queer News Tonight, hundreds of Polish nationalists and defenders of LGBTQ rights faced off against each other on opposite sides of a street in central Warsaw on Sunday. The nationalists burned a rainbow flag while the LGBTQ activists painted one on the street. The group shouted abuse at each other, separated by a line of several police vans and dozens of policemen. Gay rights were part of the most recent election campaign in Poland, a staunchly Catholic country, and the issue is still very divisive. Queer News Tonight will continue monitoring this volatile situation closely.
Next, we'll Queer Up the Vote 2020. Will young people vote for Biden to defeat Trump? The 2020 presidential election looks to be one of the most important in America's history, but it is also one of the most highly contested. While many Democrats and Republicans alike are united under the mantra of never Trump, there's also a growing never Biden movement. Among young voters questioned, many who aren't sure if they're going to vote for Biden because they don't believe he will bring real change to Washington. Bernie Sanders, the progressive standard bearer for the left, has urged young voters toward Biden with some success. But young voters, especially LGBTQ voters, don't want to simply fix the wheel that Trump damaged. They wish to remake it entirely, and for that, Biden may not be their man.
Next, let's catch up on all the news surrounding COVID-19 with our segment called Quarantine Quickies. The first story tonight is our daily reporting of the coronavirus facts, especially important to the LGBTQ community. First, we report on coronavirus case numbers. Based on the standard acceptance of LGBTQ population, the world's LGBT COVID-19 cases stand at 1,552,227, while America's LGBTQ COVID-19 cases stand at 393,756. We remind you that America continues to be ground zero of this pandemic. The USA is just, and today America is 25.3% of all of the world's cases. Next, we report on coronavirus deaths. The world's LGBTQ COVID-19 deaths stand at a staggering 54,599, while America's LGBTQ COVID-19 deaths stand at 12,193. The USA is 22.3% of all of the world's deaths.
Quarantine Quickies. Dr. Fauci warns even the healthy can have coronavirus symptoms for months. As Dr. Birx says, masks save lives. Watch this.
Those self-reporting symptoms beyond 3 weeks of infection is now 1 in 10. Previously, we'd been thinking it was 1 in 20, but as more data is coming in, a clearer picture is emerging. My personal feeling is that at some point down the line, we're going to see that the long-term effects of COVID infection are actually even more common than that. But let's see. One interesting part of this article is the link between mild initial cases and more severe longer-term symptoms.
Top infectious disease expert Dr. Anthony Fauci has warned that even young, otherwise healthy individuals can suffer coronavirus symptoms for months after getting sick. He made the comments the same day that fellow White House advisor Dr. Deborah Birx said tens of thousands of lives could be saved if people just wear masks. In the around 7 months since we have first become aware of COVID-19, evidence has built to show that people with underlying health conditions such as diabetes, obesity, and heart problems are at greater risk of suffering complications from the disease. But so-called long haulers who suffer symptoms for weeks and months, despite some being healthy, have also emerged.
Yeah, it's the whole COVID thing is really, really difficult to deal with. You know, just this week I have a friend who caught the Rona, as we say. And so I just, you know, I'm thinking about them and I'm wishing you well.
Well, I think both health advisors continue. We're getting ready, by the way, America, to do our 24th version of Q's Q&A on coronavirus with Dr. Howard Grossman. I think the number one issue on the story is medical advice must be followed. All stop.
True. I think that this story just shows that coronavirus is real and it's scary for everybody, which makes it even more scary. I know one of my clients had 0 symptoms and went to get a surgical procedure, and the doctor's like, oh my goodness, you have COVID-19. And she had to delay her surgery a month. But again, she's healthy and fine. You never know.
Quarantine quickies. Porn star dragged for daring to defend Fire Island pandemic parties. Watch this.
Fire Island pines the day after a holiday weekend that turned this famous gay enclave into a viral hashtag for the wrong reasons. Packed parties, masses of beach revelers engaged in what some described as an alarming lack of social distancing or masks.
It made me feel terrible.
Holiday mentality, very short-sighted.
Very selfish and very inconsiderate.
Someone's got to get sick from all of this.
Adult film star Ty Mitchell, who has appeared in scenes for Men.com and Cocky Boys, has written a new essay for BuzzFeed titled, "To Survive a Pandemic, We Need to Make Room for Pleasure." In the extensive write-up, he recalls being out on Fire Island for the 4th of July weekend and briefly attending the infamous meat rack pandemic party. Needless to say, fans and critics of his were not happy to hear that he had broken just about every protocol imaginable in the pursuit of his so-called pleasure. As someone put it in the comments, the pandemic is not over just because you're bored.
We are approaching Labor Day weekend, and I think after all of the millions of words that I think I have spoken on coronavirus and the stories that we have done at Q News tonight, it's happening out and now Gay Town Hall, we have 2 conclusions. We are either going to safely try to mitigate the best that we can the coronavirus, or we're going to surrender. We only have 2 choices. There is no middle ground. And frankly, this adult film star advocates the surrender, which means we're going to have 1 million deaths, which were the original projections, because we do no mitigation at all. The problem is, he's not the one that's going to die. His mother and his grandmother are the ones that are going to die.
His loved ones. You know, it's sad because this reminds me of when I used to facilitate an it was called the M Project, but it was a gay youth group for men 18 to 30. And a lot of the times when we would have discussions about HIV, most of these young kids, and this was 20 years ago, thought they were going to die of HIV, and they just accepted it. Yeah, I'm gay now, and that's what's going to happen. I'm going to get HIV. And I think some people are like, you know what? I'm going to get it. Might as well celebrate now. And I think that's scary.
You know, I don't disagree with the idea that there has to be pleasure out there. I mean, we can't just, you know,
right.
Not have,
We're not cardboard.
That's exactly right. But my advice would be to Ty, do exactly what it is this Ty does. Pleasure myself.
All right.
Self-love is important.
Right. Happening Out Television Network, including Queer News Tonight, are proud to partner and sponsor the OUTshine Film Festival, which will run next week and later this week, August 20th to August 30th, with the opening night drive out of Stage Mother, a brilliant comedy to get the festival started off right. Tickets are on sale now for OUTshine Film Festival at outshinefilm.com. All of the platforms over the next 10 days of Happening Out Television Network will report more interesting news from one of the most important LGBTQ film festivals in the world. Here's a short video of what the festival is all about. Watch this. Well, we're very excited to report of the dozens of films being presented. One of them is called The Sound of Identity, premiering at the OUTshine Film Festival on Monday, August 24th at 7 p.m. We are about to welcome the film's director, James Kicklighter. The film is very interesting as it is about the first transgender woman ever to perform as Don Giovanni in a professional opera, making her historic debut in one of the reddest states in the United States. Welcome, James, to Queer News Tonight.
Hi, thank you for having me.
We're excited to have you. You're coming from Los Angeles.
I am. It is very hot right here in LA, so it's great to be here in the air conditioning.
James, the OUTshine Film Festival comes from South Florida. We know all about heat.
Yes, you do.
Tell us about this film, and you're the director. Tell us about, give us a synopsis of what we're going to see when we participate in the film.
Yes, The Sound of Identity is the story of Lucia Lucas, who is the first transgender opera singer in history to have a leading role on the American stage. And so our film really follows the process of the risk that the Tulsa Opera took in placing her in one of the reddest states in America and having this historic moment take place for the LGBTQ community. In showing that process, we're able to understand a lot more about opera, but also, more importantly, understand how we present ourselves in public and what that identity means for us as members of the community.
You know, I was fascinated when I was reading the summary notes on the film. As the director of the film and the progress of creating this film that's good for the LGBT community, but also our traditional community, did it make any difference in terms of the subject matter here from a trans perspective or performing Don Giovanni as an opera singer? Would it have made any difference if it was in the performance was in a state like California or New York or South Florida that is very embracing to the LGBT community versus Oklahoma, which is very red? Was that a central piece that we're going to learn about in your movie, your film?
Well, it's an interesting point. I would say that the LGBT community, of course, exists in Tulsa and in Oklahoma. They have a great center there where they work with LGBT teens across the state, along with other members of the community. But I do think that having this event take place in Tulsa perhaps draws attention to it in a different way. As you point out, if you're in Miami or New York or Los Angeles, that might be something that people would expect. But by having it in Tulsa, I think that creates a new conversation in a community that may not necessarily have that conversation. I think it's very important that if we're going to have conversations about equality and bringing forth people's rights, we've got to take our messages to places that wouldn't normally hear them.
Well, the theme of the film is, of course, very interesting, and I'm looking forward to seeing it. I'm curious from your perspective, why do you think LGBTQ film festivals today, like Los Angeles is getting ready to start here in South Florida. OUTshine this year, unique in both Los Angeles and in South Florida. They're virtual digital film festivals. So you have unique opportunities to introduce your films into a much broader audience than you had before. Why do you think film festivals are important in 2020 for the LGBTQ community?
Well, I think film festivals have always been important, but maybe this year more than ever, as we've all been locked away in the midst of this pandemic, the unique opportunity here that we have as filmmakers, as members of the film community, is that you don't have to live in Miami to see The Sound of Identity or any other film that's screening at the festival. You can live in the and that's also true of other venues where we'll be screening the film in the next couple of months. Having that opportunity really allows us to expand that audience and meet people in different places. So in Florida, you might live in Miami, you might live in Fort Lauderdale, sorry, in Jacksonville, anywhere in the state of Florida, and you can have access without having to go physically to Miami. So I think that's a really remarkable opportunity for audiences.
Well, James Kicklighter, we're really appreciative that you've joined us tonight live from Los Angeles for your new film, The Sound of Identity. America, we remind you, especially Florida and South Florida, you can see the film at the OUTshine Film Festival. It is coming this Monday, August 24th at 7 p.m. Quite an interesting subject, very timely in terms of LGBT community, especially as you heard, in terms of how the response of an opera performance from the trans community in one of the reddest states in America at a time that is pivotally important between red and blue in America. So congratulations on the film, James, and we're really glad you joined us tonight at Q News Tonight.
Thank you so much. Check the trailer out on the internet.
All right.
Happening Out Network is broadcasting on our brand new set in partnership with the Sunshine Cathedral, the world's largest queer church in Fort Lauderdale, Wilton Manors, Florida. We joke that we're from the gayest place on planet Earth. Support of their Sunday celebration is the largest LGBTQ religious broadcast in the world every Sunday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern. We encourage you to tune in. Sunshine Cathedral is my queer church. Watch this.
Hi, I'm Robert Griffin, the Executive Minister here at the Sunshine Cathedral, and the Sunshine Cathedral is my queer church.
We'd also like to thank our set designer, Concepto Modern Living here in Fort Lauderdale, for making this beautiful new set possible.
Tonight is part 24 of Q's Q&A on coronavirus and the LGBTQ community, August 18th. This special segment is designed to be unique in America to answer your questions about coronavirus for the LGBTQ community during this pandemic.
Every Tuesday, we have an American pioneer in AIDS, HIV medical treatment. With us is Dr. Howard Grossman, specialist in international medicine with an emphasis on HIV. He was the executive director of the American Academy of HIV Medicine. He has become nationally recognized as an educator on HIV issues and as an advocate for the LGBT civil rights and their rights of our community.
He is also and has become our medical expert during pandemic for Q and Queer News Tonight. Welcome, Dr. Grossman. First off, I have to say, you've got some coronavirus swirling around you in the
Green
in the
screen.
set. Before we get into viewer questions, it's been another big week for science and the medical community and COVID-19. Before we get into the viewer questions, I just want to ask you what's on your mind this week.
Well, Al, thank you first. I can't believe we're at 6 months. Coronavirus has been such a problem for all of us, but I have to say, spending Tuesday evenings with you guys is a highlight of my week. So thank you. This week, you know, it's just getting through. I think a lot of people are beginning to realize that this is going to be a long process. We've been saying here on Q News Tonight that it's going to be a couple of years, and I think people are starting to realize that that's true, and they're going to have to come up with some creative solutions to do things like having sex, to do things like having a film festival, to socializing with one another. And we've seen more articles this week about how to socialize in the pandemic, how to do it safely. And I think that that's good news.
You know, Howard, of course I can call you Howard, Dr. Grossman. We reported tonight about the Daily Beast article about socialization at Fire Island over the 4th of July. I made the comment, are we to the point where we just surrender to one of two conclusions? We mitigate and we follow the rules, or we just surrender and say, okay, we just can't, and whatever happens, happens.
You know, Al, we can never surrender.
Yeah, well, and that's what I was going to ask. There's this growing sentiment, which is certainly pushed by the president, which is get back to work, get into the schools, whatever happens will happen, whatever it is the president's attitude. What do you think about those two conclusions?
Well, you know, he lives in a little shell where he's every day or multiple times a day, and went around and he's tested. So I don't take his opinion as meaning anything. Let's talk about an empathy lag, as Michelle Obama said. There is a man who was born without the empathy gene. And I think you're seeing around the country that people are talking with their feet. So you're seeing schools open. University of North Carolina opened up and suddenly had 179 cases within a week and has nearly 300 kids quarantined. Schools in Georgia, in Indiana that opened up and closed right down because coronavirus was spreading like crazy. Kids are not immune to this disease. Kids are carriers for the most part, but they also can get very sick, and they may get sick months later. So I think as people are seeing the consequences of their actions, we're seeing them shut back down again. Now, you ask if we should give up, and I say no. There's no reason to give up. We are a creative people, especially in this community. I think we have to realize, you know, Donald Trump, as the posters in the early days of HIV and ACT UP said, Ronald Reagan has blood on his hands. Donald Trump is a mass murderer. The 170,000 plus people who are dead are on his hands. And anybody who votes for him is an accomplice to murder. And anybody who doesn't vote is almost as guilty as them. So when we talked earlier, believe me, I understand that young people want to see massive change. You're not going to get it in this election, and I think that there's a clear choice. These are not the same people, and I think that if we're going to see the end of this epidemic, it needs a change in government. And I would encourage young people, as I often do, get involved, lobbying your congresspeople, tell them what you want. Run for office. You run for local office. We have young people running for local office today in Broward County that's making a difference. So
it's interesting to me that you intersect medical advice in COVID and political reality. I just wish the White House Coronavirus Commission would do the exact same thing medically and intersect the politics better, because they run independent, and I think that's what creates the confusion. Let's move on to some of the questions.
Can I, before you do really quick, I just want to say, I think one of the great frustrations for all of our generations is the feeling of powerlessness, and it's one that has been knocked into our heads for the last 40 years, that we are powerless, we do not have power. and we can't make change. And that is just not true. We saw it on the streets with the Black Lives Matter movement. People are power, and if you get out there, get off Facebook, and really exercise that power, you can make change.
All right, let's jump into questions. And Misty, let's start with you.
Yes, our first viewer question. Yale gets approval of new saliva test. What are the implications for LGBTQ America?
Well, not just LGBTQ America. It's very exciting because this is a test that can be run in 3 hours. 90 tests can be done every hour.
Wow.
It's done with saliva. Believe me, I've had the ice pick up the nose so many times in the last few months. It will be a pleasure to be able to do it quickly like that. I think hopefully this is still a test that needs to be done using laboratory equipment. I really would hope that the tests we get soon are point of care, rapid tests. That's what we really need. Even if they're not as accurate, they may be good screening tools, and that's really what we need. But anything that makes it easier is going to help.
Do you have confidence that there's going to be good accuracy? I don't know how you would define good, but there's going to be good accuracy.
Yeah, I think it'll get better and better. Yeah. But as we're learning, as you hear about vaccines, I think people are thinking, for example, with vaccines, they will be 100% effective. As Dr. Fauci says, if a vaccine is 50% effective, that has a tremendous impact on public health. It's not 100%, but it will have a huge impact. If it's 70% effective, even better. So it's very rare. The measles vaccine is 98% effective. Every other vaccine is not as effective. So people need to expect that we're not going to get 100% efficacy there either.
Dr. Grossman, I read an article this week. I'm so glad for this viewer question because it confused the heck out of me. Ty's going to ask you that.
So the viewer asks, signaling cells can kill coronavirus. What's the truth so far?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by that, but it's, there are significant parts of the immune system that aren't antibody related. That cellular immune system is very active, and we have cells that can kill coronavirus directly. They're finding more and more information about the cellular part of our immune system. The antibody part has what they call humoral immunity has gotten all the attention, but the cellular immunity may be just as important or more important.
A next question from a viewer. LGBTQ parents, kids, teachers. In light of school closures, is it safe to go back to school?
You know what? It depends on where you are, and that is very clear all over. New York City is down to 1% in New York State, 1% positive infection rate. So it seems to be safe for them to open their schools. Florida is in a completely different place. When you have, Miami and Broward with high levels, 13, 14, 20% positive tests, then it's not safe to go back to school. I understand the other day down here in Palm Beach County, they were talking about reopening the schools, but they're talking about less than 5%, and they're still at 7%. So I really think it depends on what's going on in your local area, and that should be the guideline for parents and kids.
Speaking of guidelines, a viewer asks, it's August, we're in the middle of COVID-19. Do you recommend a flu shot?
Absolutely. It's never been more important than ever to get the flu shot. Now, the flu shot comes out this month. I will tell you that in my experience, when I start giving it in August, nobody gets sick. And if I wait until November, December, when everybody's coming down with colds, people get the flu shot, and then they say, oh, I got a cold, it must be the flu shot. You were going to get a cold anyway because it was December. So I would encourage people to get that flu shot early and to do it this year, because if the more confusion there is between COVID-19 and the flu, the harder it's going to be to treat people, the more delay in treatment there will be, and the sicker people will get.
Yeah.
You know, Dr. Grossman, I want to make sure that I provide an exclamation point, because you've said something that I haven't heard as clearly stated as you just did. LGBTQ America. We're in the middle of August. Do you know when the flu shot is going to be deployed, Dr. Grossman?
It should be out any minute now. It usually comes out around the middle of August.
And what we've just heard, I plan to get the flu shot. I've gotten I've gotten the shot for years, but Howard has just told me, Al, get it right away. That's the first time I've heard that. So this flu shot comes out, this vaccination comes out, get it right away.
And give yourself time to build up immunity, so by the time flu season gets here, you won't get it, because you do not want to walk into an emergency room and they don't know whether you have COVID or flu.
Yeah, super clear.
Yeah.
Another viewer asked, tonight we reported that there might be a new HIV treatment. And a viewer asked, Dr. Grossman, how hopeful are you about the new HIV treatment?
Listen, I have to say first, I am very hopeful about all gene therapies. This gene therapy takes gene-modified HIV-specific T cells that can directly kill HIV and puts them into people. That said, I think you guys are a little over-optimistic here. This is a phase 1 trial in humans, so it's the first time it's being put into humans. The point of phase 1 is to make sure that this doesn't kill anybody. And we know from other gene therapy trials that have, in fact, caused significant problems that gene therapy is not easy. Now, hopefully, these cells are exciting in the test tube. They are incredibly exciting in what they can do. And so I am going to hope for the best. But I learned a long time ago that, we can talk about HIV cure in the future, but I don't really put my money on anything until I see data. And so that's what I suggest for people.
Howard, I want to ask you specifically. We hear the cautions that you just provided, but in normal, let's say that this human trial that has begun has success, or they see success in the trials. What timeline process takes place? What would you anticipate, assuming it meets the standards of success going forward? What timeline are we talking about in terms of how this might unravel?
Well, remember, a phase 1 trial can take weeks to a few months. You have small numbers of people testing different doses of a product to see what kind of efficacy lines you get, and also make sure that see what kind of toxicity you get. But it's very small numbers, and it happens relatively quickly. Phase 2 is a bigger trial that's looking at more efficacy. And phase 3 is when you put it into literally hundreds or thousands of people to make sure that you don't uncover rare side effects, and to really lock down the efficacy. At that point, they've usually picked 1 or 2 doses that they think will work. So this stuff takes years. It really doesn't happen overnight, just the logistics. And one of the actually disappointing things we heard this week was that clinical trials of treatments for COVID are having real trouble enrolling. Because if you're looking for people who are acutely infected, by the time we're getting the tests back, often it's too late to enroll them in the trial. And if you're talking about people in the hospital, it's hard to treat people in an experimental sense in the hospital, especially if people are on respirators and can't consent. So, they're really having trouble recruiting for all of these trials. I would encourage people to, who are looking to volunteer, to get in touch with research centers.
The next question, Dr. Grossman, kind of shifts gears a little bit. It comes from a viewer, but actually it probably could come from me. What's the best way to deal with the midlife crisis?
Besides buying a
Ty,
Corvette?
did you write this question as a viewer?
I'm not going to answer that.
Well, like they said in The Women, if men were like women, they would do their hair or redo the house. But that's not something that we generally tend to do. I think that one thing that's important in a midlife crisis to realize, it's being way on the other side of that it's never too late to change. That if you're not happy with where you are, you can pursue a new career. Yes, maybe when you're 45, you're not going to ever be a ballet dancer or a professional baseball player. But there are still lots of changes you can make to make yourself happy, and I think that's important. The other thing I would encourage is mental health services. Therapy
is not for crazy people. Therapy is for sane people who want their lives to be better. In order to do therapy, you need to be able to have insight and talk. People with severe mental illness who require lots of medication can't really do therapy. But therapy, so I always encourage people to seek out a therapist and talk about these problems, not keep them inside, and look for changes in your life that would be beneficial.
Howard, did I just hear your soundbite say that therapy is for a specific kind of person? So in other words, it's good for me, but if it's not for crazy people, Ty and Misty shouldn't be availed to it. Is that what I just heard you say?
I shouldn't use the word crazy. That's a pejorative term. But people who have really severe mental illness, where they really don't have insight, where they may be actively hallucinating, you can't do talk therapy in most of those cases. But, you know, therapy is a privilege. I mean, the ability to spend time with somebody, delving into yourself, figuring out how you can be a better person should be a wonderful experience. It can be painful, but should be something to grow with.
Absolutely. Any final thoughts of this week? You've been here 24 weeks, Dr. Grossman. 24 weeks.
We didn't expect this, did we?
Yeah, I honestly, when I read the number, when I heard, or not read it, when I heard Ty or Misty say the number, it was kind of breathtaking. 24 weeks. Anything you want to finish out? Those are our viewer questions for this week.
You know, I just would again encourage people, this is going to be a long process. Don't give up. Get creative. Figure out who you can spend time with that's safe and how you can spend time. We can spend time with masks. We can spend time 6 feet apart. We don't always need to be 6 feet apart if we're wearing masks. We can stay out of work if we're sick. Now, I've heard about people who say, well, I don't have any sick time. I can't afford to stay out of work. That's something we need to deal with as a people. That's something, again, you know, one of the reasons that I support a change in administration is because part of the Democratic platform is paid sick leave and paid family leave. And I think those things are important. People shouldn't have to choose between paying their rent and going to work sick. That's something that we have to change in this country.
A quick question for you I haven't checked back in on. Has your testing situation improved, availability of testing for?
You know, testing for us is better. We have much more equipment from both LabCorp and Quest. Test results, mixed bag. I mean, actually what I'm finding is my regular lab tests are taking an incredibly long time to come back. Because the labs are so busy. I mean, I really feel for those people. They're running 24/7, and they don't have enough equipment or enough support from the central government that they need. But we're able to do more tests, and I think that the local health authorities are also able to do more tests. The more we get these tests that can be done quicker, the better it's going to be. You know, that's a big thing. But we know that our hospitals here in Florida are packed tight, that many people healthcare providers are overwhelmed, and this is happening. Unfortunately, the whole South is a red zone. The whole South is in deep trouble right now.
Yeah.
And we can fix it. New York proved it, as Andrew Cuomo said last night. New York proved that you could be in the worst situation and it can be fixed, but you need to be strict and you need to follow the guidelines.
Absolutely. So big messages in terms of testing and government leadership. That's what I hear you say. And of course, we can't be too critical on our testing because after all, this is only the third week in March. Oh, wait. Well, that's it for part 24 of Q's Q&A on coronavirus and the LGBTQ community. Every Tuesday night, we bring you viewer questions and the most important medical advice from our medical expert, Dr. Howard Grossman, from Midway Specialty Care Center right here in Wilton Manors, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. As always, thank you, Dr. Grossman, for being with us again tonight.
Thank you, Al.
We are going to end tonight's broadcast with the big finish. It is short story mentions of LGBTQ news or news with a gay perspective. So here we go. First on Queer News Tonight's The Big Finish. Bernie Sanders says Nero fiddled while Rome burned, Trump golfs.
This is a great analogy. According to the well-known expression, Rome's emperor at the time, a decadent and unpopular Nero, fiddled while Rome burned. The expression had a double meaning. Not only did Nero play music while his people suffered, but he was an ineffectual leader in a time of crisis, both of which apply to our leader today.
So, and to extend that metaphor even farther, it was rumored at the time that Nero actually started the fire himself.
Oh, no.
That was the rumor at the time.
Well, how appropriate.
Well, exactly. But I think that's where the metaphor is going to dissolve out, because afterwards Nero did rebuild the city, and so we do need to have our city rebuilt. But I don't want this leader to rebuild it.
No, I do not either.
And what some may not know is that Sanders was just describing a childhood memory of his when he personally saw Nero outside of Rome.
And you were friends with him back then too, right?
His joke was the best line of the DNC's night, one competing with Michelle Obama's reference to Donald Trump as a virus, as it is what it is. Loved that. The big finish. Wilson Cruz shows off a muscled body for perfect cause.
Yes, God! Wilson Cruz has always been sexy and sweet, and you just saw I shared 2 pictures that I personally got to hang out with Wilson Cruz, one at a circuit party, and of course one at
let's see
Pride.
that picture again.
Yeah, look at it again.
Row.
There's a recent picture in the very middle, and then there's 2 of us on the side.
You slut.
I just hung out with him. I didn't taste him. But he is super sweet. He is super sweet. And in this situation, smart, because he is using his clickbait for a good cause.
Yeah, I already voted, but I'd be happy to vote again.
Yeah. See, Ty could barely construct his thoughts because he was looking at those pictures.
Extraction.
Exactly. I know he wants us to vote, but I've got the perfect cause right here tonight.
Okay.
My house here in Walton Manors tonight.
Voting.
The big finish. Did you hear? Minnie Mouse helped Miley Cyrus realize her attraction to girls.
You know, this doesn't surprise me at all. We recently talked about this, and many of our hosts on the Wednesday night talk show, it's happening out right here in the studio, many of us confessed or discovered our sexual attraction or sexual orientation with a surprising attraction to cartoon characters. My question it's true. My question for Miley is, was her attraction for the animated Minnie, or is she a furry and attracted to the live version of Minnie? Either way, girl, you're not alone in the world. People are just like you.
Minnie and Miley sitting in a tree.
Oh, Lord.
K-I-S-S.
I-N-G.
Okay. I would have thought it would have been one of the princesses from Disney. But Miley always did march to the beat of her own drum. And I'm guessing that the attraction was the pretty little bow in her hair. Oh, she doesn't have hair. The big finish. Tiger King Season 2. Are you all excited, LGBTQ community? Reportedly, it's in the works, but Carol Baskin says she wants $1 million from Netflix.
Of course she does. Her millionaire husband is dead or missing, and honestly, I don't feel bad for her. She clearly didn't get enough attention or fame in the first season and has been desperately trying to stay relevant in the last couple months.
I just don't know where else you can go with this story. I mean, it happened. He's in jail. She's killed her husband. Where do we go next?
I'm constantly embarrassed to say that Carol lives 5 minutes from my house in Sarasota. I got to change neighborhoods. I give her as much money as she asks for as long as I don't get an exclusive interview by myself with her and her tigers. Oh, wait. Let's change that slightly. To the producers of Happening Out Television, of which one is standing in front of me right now. If you ask me to interview Crazy Carol, I quit. Q News tonight.
You're afraid of pussy, big pussy at that, yeah.
The big finish. Gretchen Whitmore drops hilarious hot mic F-bomb just seconds before her DNC speech.
You know, this story is indeed hilarious. And just a reminder that some of these people we look up to are indeed human.
Yeah, I thought it was hilarious. I saw it, I laughed out loud, but I also want to pause and reflect back on the fact that when we saw a picture of George W. Bush with his middle finger up and dropping the F-bomb back in his presidency, we didn't have the same reaction.
No.
So context and remembering
And that's
But that also Democrat, Republican, conservative, different lenses.
Whitmore, by the way, America, went up 2 points in polling with me. Made her even more interesting. It's the one word we all want to say all of the time for emphasis. We use it like an adjective these days. And in front of college professor Dr. Hauser, I can't do that.
I use it all the time.
But the darn YouTube censors, they always get in the way. Curse you, you Google machine. That was an old joke. The big finish. Did you hear? It's raining chocolate. A factory glitch dusts a Swiss town in cocoa.
Great. Now everyone in this Swiss town of Olten will have diabetes.
I just like the idea that there could be rivers flowing that are chocolate flavored.
A childhood fantasy.
I was in Switzerland. I was there in March. I should have stayed.
Exactly. I love Switzerland. The mountains. I've been many times. Misty, did you know I've been to Switzerland?
I know you're world traveling.
Yes. The mountains, the scenic trains, the fiercely always stay neutral hot men. Now it's snowing chocolate in the beautiful mountain villages. It's been very nice knowing you, Ty and Misty, and everyone else, because I've already booked my one-way ticket to Switzerland.
Next Queer News Tonight presents the Al Ferguson interview of Roger Stone, Part 2, Mueller versus Trump and Stone, the Fort Lauderdale raid, Russian collusion, Attorney General Barr testifies, and how Roger Stone learns about the commutation.
For 5 decades, he's been at the heart of conservative politics. Love him or hate him, Roger Stone gives us all a glimpse into the mind of Donald Trump and the upcoming election of a lifetime. Tonight, in the most extensive interview Stone has allowed since Commutation, and the first in years for the LGBTQ community.
He extensively discusses Russian collusion and Robert Mueller as special prosecutor. Stone is at the center of the presidency and was the architect of the 2016 campaign against Hillary Clinton, and in daily communication with Trump. He extensively describes what leads to and the details of the raid in Fort Lauderdale. You hear why this show of force raised $1.6 million for his defense fund in just 24 hours after his arrest.
He talks about his reaction to Special Prosecutor Mueller's op-ed in the Washington Post last month, and his reaction when he was watching live as Attorney General Barr loses his temper in testimony at the House Judiciary Committee hearing over Stone.
Tonight, you hear how he learned about his commutation that led to a dramatic phone call from the White House and President Trump. Watch this.
So I still felt that I would be charged, but I couldn't figure out what it was that I could be charged with, because I knew I was guilty of none of those crimes. By the end of 2018, this became a weekly drumbeat. Mueller zeroes in on Stone. Mueller tightens the noose on Stone. Mueller totally focused on Stone. And then on January 25th, on January 24th, I got a phone call from a producer at CNN who said, I need your home address, I want to mail you something. I said, all right. Well, I gave her my home address, realizing that my home address could be found online fairly easily, but then when I went online and looked, I noticed that there were 2 addresses since I had fairly recently moved, and that may have caused some confusion. So I said to my wife, they're coming tomorrow morning to arrest me. And she said, you've been saying that for 6 months. I said, no, I'm pretty sure this is tomorrow. Still can't figure out what the charges might be, but I do think we need to be prepared. So I set my alarm for 5 a.m. I got up, I took a shower, I put on one of my Roger Stone Did Nothing Wrong t-shirts, and I sat in an upstairs bathroom window where you could see the entire front yard. At about 5:45, my cell phone rang. It was a member of the Fort Lauderdale Police Department who just happens to be a friend. And he said, hey, what are you doing? I said, I'm kind of waiting. Why? He said, well, I'm over at Starbucks. And there must be 30 FBI agents here getting coffee, and the drift I get is they're headed to your house. And I said, well, I've been expecting them. So I was fully cognizant that this was going to happen. Shortly thereafter, I saw the CNN crew show up and set up right outside my house, 25 feet from the front door. That was 14 minutes before the FBI arrived. The shortest stakeout in American journalistic history. Then 17 armored vehicles with their red lights flashing arrived. They taped off the street. They warned all my neighbors to stay inside, that it was a dangerous situation. They brought this giant battering ram up to the front door as if I wasn't going to answer it. They had these really mean-looking dogs on leashes. There were 29 agents in full SWAT gear, wearing night goggles, carrying assault weapons. I didn't know this until later, but 2 amphibious units pulled up to the canal behind my house, because Port Lauderdale is the sister city of Venice. We have a lot of canals. I lived on a canal at that time, and there were frogmen on the boats, all armed. They completely surrounded the house, and then they pounded on the door. So I opened the door, and they said, "Are you Roger Stone?" I said, "I am." They said, "Would you please step outside and put your hands behind your back? We have a warrant for your arrest. We also have a warrant to search these premises." I said, "Okay." Came out, kept my chest up to make sure the camera could read my t-shirt, and put my hands behind my back, and I was cuffed. I was wearing cut-off shorts, bare feet. And they said, "Who else is in the house?" And I said, "Only my wife, 2 dogs, and 3 cats." And they said, "There's no one else in the house." I said, "No, there's no one else in the house." "How about guns?" I said, "You folks are well aware of the fact that I don't own a gun." Then nobody in the house has a gun. I said, "There are no guns in the house, even though I support the Second Amendment." And then went running up the stairs to wake up my wife. Now, my wife is hearing impaired, so without her hearing aids, she's completely deaf. With her hearing aids, she's at about 20%. And then this terrible thought flashed through my mind that they would issue a command, not recognize that she couldn't hear them or understand them, and that she would get shot. Fortunately, that didn't happen, but she did wake up looking down the barrel of 2 guns, same way I opened the door, looking down the barrel of 2 assault weapons. Then they marched her out in the street in her nightgown and her bare feet to stand out in the middle of the street about 10 feet away from me. I, of course, said, "I'd like to know what crime I'm charged with, and I'd like to speak to my lawyer." By the way, no one ever read me my Miranda rights. Kind of interesting. They said, "Well..."
You were arrested with no Miranda rights.
Correct, that is correct. They said, "We are going to take you to the FBI processing center in Miramar, where you'll be able to meet your lawyers there. They're going to meet us there." I said, "That's fine. I'd still like to see the charges that I'm charged with." They said, "Well, we'll show them to you in the car." So I got into the car with 3 agents, and we of course caught the traffic going to Miramar, so it took longer to get there. But they flipped over this notebook, and I realized that I was charged with lying to Congress. Really? Well, wait a minute. Comey lied to Congress. Clapper lied to Congress. Brennan lied to Congress. Hillary lied to Congress. McCabe lied to Congress. Mueller himself would ultimately lie to Congress. This is a first-time white-collar process crime. It has nothing to do with the 2016 election. It has to do with the aftermath. They threw a jury tampering charge in there to make it sound nefarious. The irony of that is the juror that I was accused of tampering with threatened to shoot other witnesses, exculpatory witnesses in my case, in the head, but they didn't charge him with jury tampering. I was alleged to have threatened to steal his dog. Well, if you read the entire email chain, you would understand that I was objecting to the fact that he wasn't feeding the dog, and I told him in the previous email I was going to report him to the ASPCA or Animal Control in New York City because the dog didn't look healthy to me. Context. He wrote a letter and said on the stand that he never felt threatened by me, and he never thought I would steal his dog. But nonetheless, I was convicted of witness tampering, a conviction I've appealed. So you asked me how I felt. I felt exhilarated because I understood they had made a giant public relations mistake, arresting a 67-year-old man who doesn't own a gun, who doesn't own a valid passport, for a non-violent white-collar process crime, was overkill of the largest magnitude. If they had simply said to my lawyer, we're going to charge your client, please bring him down to the White House, to the courthouse for arraignment, I simply would have done so. They actually spoke to my lawyer the day before I was arrested because we turned over 30 pages of text messages between myself and the government's chief witness, Randy Credico, which I believe proved indisputably that he was my source of what little I knew about WikiLeaks. That information, as well as multiple exculpatory witnesses that went to the grand jury, were ignored because they had already decided what to charge me with.
I want to ask, so your observation here in terms of, interesting, because I just asked you, how did you feel at that moment and that detail? The obvious follow-up then is, why did they do this? Why did they use this much force, this much emphasis, this amount of response just simply to arrest you? Why did they do that?
It's an interesting question. I mean, first of all, I should point out that my legal defense fund raised $1.6 million in the subsequent, 24 hours. Up until that time, I had raised a couple $100,000. So it benefited me in that way. I guess the idea was to intimidate me. Perhaps later on, it would become very clear that they wanted me to cooperate and testify against the president, which I declined to do. We can get into that. But also maybe to send a message to other witnesses who they wanted to cooperate in my indictment that this same treatment would be given to them. It is also, by the way, the signature of Andrew Weissman, the epically corrupt prosecutor who was the de facto head of the Mueller investigation. He's had a number of disciplinary problems, but this is right out of his playbook. Completely unnecessary. This cost the taxpayers $1.1 million. But the most important reason they did it was for CNN, was to put the black hat on me, to make me look like a drug kingpin or some kind of a gangster. I mean, just because I sometimes dressed like a gangster.
I was going to say you're bowler.
Doesn't mean I've never worn a bowler. I do wear a Homburg.
Oh, okay.
Important distinction.
Stand corrected.
Bowlers are for like silent film comedians.
I've read a number of times that people suggested that the reason the heavy hand of the arrest and the arrangement, the alleged arrangement with CNN, was basically out of frustration that the special prosecutor's office couldn't get the president. And so as a result, they were going after the next best thing. What do you think about that observation?
There's some evidence to that effect that happens later on. First of all, it's important to recognize that I was arrested at 6:05. At 7 a.m., a CNN reporter emailed a draft copy of my indictment to one of my lawyers. But the draft copy had no court markings on it, no time stamp, no pacer stamp, but it did still have the meta tag initials of the person who wrote it, Andrew Weissman. Just the fact that CNN had that is a violation of the law. That document was sealed and didn't get unsealed until 9:30 that morning by a magistrate in D.C. So the claim by CNN that they had no advance notice is disproven by the fact that they had a copy of my indictment hours before it was unsealed. We filed a complaint with the judge on that. She, of course, didn't care. It's okay when the government breaks the law. You just can't break the law if you're a defendant or the rules. So there is your proof. Because they were also executing a search warrant, And they would then go through my house for the next 13 hours. They pulled these 2 large trucks up to the front yard. They set up these temporary tents and these long tables. And they literally took everything I own, or my wife owns, and went through every square inch of the house, looking at everything, looking for something. They took all my electronic devices, my computer, my laptop, my cell phone, all of my computer floppy disks. You know, of course, what they found. Nothing. No Russian collusion, no WikiLeaks collaboration, nothing of value. I have a lot of books, because when I lived in New York City, I used to go to the Strand bookstore and buy books used, and I'm a voracious reader. They took every book that I had, took it out of the shelf, flipped through it to make sure that I wasn't hiding anything inside, and threw it on the floor.
I'm curious. Later, Special Prosecutor Mueller wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post.
Yes.
I have not read that you commented on it, but basically saying after commutation from the president that regardless, you're still a convicted felon.
Yes.
And what he said in the op-ed, what was your reaction to what Mueller
What he
said?
says is categorically untrue. It's the recycle. Roger Stone was in touch with Russian intelligence officers, plural. He's referring to a Twitter direct message exchange that I had with the persona of Lucifer 2.0. We know about it because I released the full text of it in 2017. It's benign. Secondarily, the exchange happens in late October, long after WikiLeaks has already released all of their documents, meaning any kind of collaboration or collusion is chronologically impossible. The content of it speaks for itself. There's nothing there that's inappropriate or illegal or even vaguely interesting. It's pattern. But here's the best part. They can't prove that Lucifer 2.0 is a Russian intelligence officer. They just assert it. What court of law has ruled on that? Where's that been tried at trial? I wanted to prove at my trial that it's not true using forensic evidence and expert testimony, but I was denied that right. So, and it's interesting because the way he worded it, he said that Stone was in communications with Russian intelligence officers known to us. Within an hour of this being published, Rod Rosenstein puts up a tweet quoting Mueller, but he changes it very cleverly to Roger Stone was in touch with known Russian intelligence officers. See how clever that is? It makes it sound like I was knowingly in touch with somebody I believe to be a Russian. Even if he is a Russian, let's assume that he is, the contact proves nothing whatsoever. This is the recycle. We're all the way back at the beginning. We're recycling facts that I've explained 100 times. I don't have the forum of the Washington Post, but whoever wrote this for Mueller is just incorrect.
It brings me to the question. When Special Prosecutor Mueller wrote the op-ed in the Washington Post, what was your personal reaction to it? Did you take it? I hear you of his inaccuracy, but did you take it personally? Did you feel just one more time another wall has fallen?
They are trying still, I think hopelessly, to justify this entire escapade. The declassified documents that finally were released several months ago prove emphatically that they never had any evidence of Russian collusion on which to base this investigation. It was illegitimately started, and in my case, they didn't even approve an investigation into me until 3 months after they had already concluded there was no Russian interference.
And again, your theory of why they did this was because?
Because, well, we find out later. They did it because I have a 40-year relationship with Donald Trump, because they were well aware of the fact that we were in constant phone contact through almost all of the end of 2015 and all of 2016. And I think they viewed me as someone who might be able to be pressured to flip and testify against the president. they actually prove this later. But to answer your question, my immediate response was to sit down and write a rebuttal, which was printed, I believe, at the Daily Caller, or perhaps the Gateway Pundit, or both in some form. It's now a standard item in my daily speech. This is not the first time. They will recycle the same false charges. This is really simple. If I was involved in Russian collusion, you had 3 years and $30 million, why didn't you charge me with it? Andrew Weissman, who's the de facto head of the Mueller investigation, because I believe Mueller himself to be non compos mentis, he writes in the New York Times after my commutation, we need to drag Stone in front of the grand jury and see what he knows. Hey, Andrew, you had 3 years. You never called me to the grand jury because there is nothing to find, and you know it.
Interesting. In the House Judiciary Committee a couple of weeks ago, I'm curious to your reaction, because that's basically what Attorney General Barr said to the committee. And finally, in one heated exchange, he said, I'm paraphrasing, the rightness of sentencing a 67-year-old man to 7 to 9 years in prison. And it was kind of an off-the-cuff frustration of when is enough going to be enough. Now, regardless of what you feel about AG Barr or this entire situation, I thought at the time when I watched him, because I watched him do that live, and he kind of lost his temper for a moment, lost his composure.
Exactly. Or anyone outside the department wanted you to do, and that's what you did. No. Attorney
let me ask you, do you think it's fair? Do you think it is fair for a 67-year-old man to be sent to prison for 7 to 9 years?
It was in accordance with the sentencing.
No, it was not.
You just said that it was, and your line prosecutors will testify that it was.
I thought about Roger Stone, and I thought, well, Roger Stone is probably watching this right now. What would his reaction be that the Attorney General basically said, and from his perspective, what is right and what is right? What was your reaction when the Attorney General said that?
Well, he was simply telling the truth. The recommendation, prosecutors in my case, just for the record, who are not career, non-political line prosecutors, as the media keeps describing them. Jonathan Kravis worked for Barack Obama as a political appointee in the White House for 8 years. Aaron Zelinsky worked for Hillary Clinton as a political appointee in the legal counsel's office at the State Department for 2 years. The other, Michael Miranda, went to become the chief content officer at Facebook, where the first thing he did was to ban Roger Stone. These people, if you read it, they want me held responsible for crimes I wasn't charged with or convicted of. For example, I wrote a book called The Myth of Russian Collusion. It published on February 9th. You can look it up on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or Publishers Daily. That's the official publication date. The gag order didn't come into place until several days later. So therefore, the book does not violate the ban. Oh yes, it does. 25 more months. Roger Stone threatened a federal judge. This is my favorite one. I posted an image created by an organization called Corruption Central. In the upper left-hand corner, very small, is their watermarked, trademarked logo. I have an affidavit from the graphic artist who designed it. It is not a rifle's crosshair. It was based on a Celtic cross. It's on their stationery. It's on their website. It's on every image of anyone they've created. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Mark Zuckerberg. But in a media feeding frenzy, by the end of the day, that became Roger Stone produced an image with a rifle crosshair superimposed over the judge's face, which is not what happened. And I went under oath on this, and I said, yes, I admitted to stupidity. Publishing an image that was open to misinterpretation, but I didn't mean to threaten anyone. It doesn't matter. I wasn't charged with or convicted of threatening a federal judge. There's a very specific crime. That's a serious crime, except for I didn't commit it, and no court says that I did, but they want to give me an extra year in jail, again, for a crime I did not commit. There's no judiciary finding that that was the case. There are other examples. I'm just giving you two.
I was going to ask you, there are other things that I want to explore with you, remembering that we're talking to an LGBTQ audience. But as it related to all of this, as it relates to the commutation, did you have notice in advance that that was going to happen? Before it was announced publicly, did you know?
Did I know
that your sentence was going to be commuted?
No, I actually had no firsthand assurances. I'd had no contact with the president for 2 years on the insistence of both my lawyers and his lawyers.
Yeah. Okay. So you had no notice that that was coming.
And my lawyers had never talked to the White House lawyers. I had a number of mutual friends who were outraged by my prosecution. I guess the part that we have to cover, because it puts everything in context, is on March 14th of 2019, all of this began to make sense when one of the prosecutors, assistant U.S. attorney, contacted one of my lawyers and asked for a private meeting. And they met in Washington at the Justice Department, and they said, this was 2 weeks before the Mueller report was to be issued. They said, look, it's your client's going to be convicted. A DC jury is going to hate his guts. He's going to go away for a long time, probably tantamount to a life sentence. We think it's time for him to cooperate. We think it's time for him to come clean. We think it's time for him to confess. We think it's time for him to remember this list of phone calls between himself and candidate Trump. And if he's willing to finally admit that these were about coordinating the WikiLeaks disclosures with the Russians, we might be prepared to recommend leniency in his sentencing. In other words, they wanted me to lie. They wanted me to bear false witness against the president. I had testified before the House Intelligence Committee under oath. I never discussed WikiLeaks with the president. True then, true now. By the way, I passed 2 polygraph tests conducted by the most reputable 2 operators here in the state of Florida, the people FDLE and the FBI use, and I passed both of them. Donald Trump, in his written answers to interrogatories from Mueller, said the same thing. Also happens to be true. They wanted me to contradict that. I refused. Now, in the aftermath of my commutation, Congressman Jerry Nadler, Adam Schiff, Hillary Clinton, others have said Stone blackmailed the president. He had knowledge of misconduct by the president, but he maintained his silence in return for clemency. There's no evidence of that whatsoever. That is a complete fabrication after the fact. If they, in their investigation, knew that, they would have charged me with it, and they would have impeached Trump about it. It simply doesn't exist. Now, there are 2 witnesses who gave uncorroborated plea bargain-induced testimony that they overheard conversations between me and the president, but even their testimony is full of holes. Michael Cohen says it was in July. Then he says, no, maybe it was in August. I'm not sure when it was, but it was never. That's when it was. So that's not evidence. That's artifice.
So you hadn't had contact with the president for 2 years. You had no notice in advance of the commutation.
Except for, I should say, I had faith that it was.
Yes, yeah, I heard you on that point. I'm curious, do you recall where you were when you first heard the news?
Yeah, I was in my living room here in the, I guess it would be the Victoria Park section of Fort Lauderdale.
Okay.
We have moved to a much more modest abode.
You were watching the news?
Well, what happened was around 5 o'clock, various news outlets, I think Fox was first, but then followed by ABC, and then it became ubiquitous. There were reports that the president would commute my sentence.